Hi, I'm Jana. I used to be a Jehovah's Witness. I was raised that way. Then I became a Protestant when I left, and now I'm a Catholic. I did an interview recently with Matt from the Unapologetic Catholic and Keith from the Cordial Catholic, and I was able to look at some of the comments under those videos, and it was really fun to read, seeing all those really interesting comments and upbuilding comments. I also saw a few comments that said I was going from one cult to another, and I thought that was kind of interesting, and I decided that I'd like to sort of talk about it here. I've actually done an interview on YouTube before with my husband Curtis on a channel called Whoever Has the Sun. It's run by a really awesome guy named Hussein. Go check out the channel. But we did that interview when we were still Protestants, and going through the comments back then, they were really awesome to read too, but I never saw any comments saying that I had gone from one cult to another. And I'm assuming that the people who wrote those comments under these more recent videos are probably Protestants watching my Catholic conversion story. So why do people think that going to a small Protestant church out of the Jehovah's Witness organization is not going from one cult to another, but going to the Catholic Church after the Witnesses is going from one cult to another? What in their minds make the Watchtower organization and the Catholic Church so similar? The answer occurred to me pretty quickly. Maybe it already has to you, but I thought that people probably identify both the Watchtower and the Catholic Church as having similar or in common their authority structure. The authority structure of the Watchtower is definitely mirrored after the Catholic Church. It's funny to me since the Watchtower, in its early days especially, vehemently raged against the Catholic Church, but it still imitated something fundamental to the Church at the same time, its authority structure. The thing with imitations, though, is that it's never the same as the real thing, and having been both a Jehovah's Witness and now a Catholic, I can definitely compare the two, and I'd like to talk a little bit about it right now. The Watchtower's authority is in place to control you. The focus is manipulating you to maybe donating more money, providing free labor, or attempting to make more Jehovah's Witnesses by handing out free literature. And it's not free, by the way, because the Jehovah's Witnesses are the ones paying for it. The Watchtower is basically a hierarchical pyramid scheme, and the top leadership, the governing body, is not in place to primarily protect their doctrine or to preserve tradition. It's in place to protect the shareholder interests and direct their doctrines and instructions to fit with whatever their goals are at that time or their understandings. You are a cog in a vast machine, and you remain a cog by allowing yourself to be blindfolded by the organization, and you're not allowed to ask questions, basically. This is why Jehovah's Witness teaching can do a 180 on their beliefs, like just in a very short time. The witnesses will accept it willingly too, because the authority structure is not there to necessarily preserve anything at all. It can just change. Their authority structure is there as an ever-evolving guide that they can look to in a chaotic world. And I know that sounds kind of crazy to an outsider, since the organization sounds chaotic itself, since their beliefs can change so quickly. And that's true logically, but it doesn't make much sense logically. But in a chaotic world, sometimes a familiar chaotic is reassuring and comforting. And ultimately, though, you do have to give the Jehovah's Witnesses some credit, especially if you're Protestant. The Protestant world that the majority of witnesses live in, at least the Western world that they're surrounded by, is extremely confusing. There can be one street with multiple different churches, all different denominations. Which one are they supposed to go to? That's their question, if they were to look around. That was a common issue that was presented to us as Jehovah's Witnesses. And it's probably a very real reason that many Jehovah's Witnesses are actually hesitant or indifferent to even look outside of the organization that they've likely been raised in. It's just too overwhelming to try and sort through all of that. And I could personally understand this even more clearly as a Protestant when I started asking more and more questions and got deeper into theology and history. The Jehovah's Witnesses understand that two opposing stances cannot be right at the same time. And Protestants who agree with that say that they agree with it anyways, but in practice, they're much more likely to overlook that denominations may contradict each other over really important issues. Or they may even overlook that people in their own church or own denomination have completely opposing beliefs. For example, you might talk to one Protestant who believes that baptism is only a symbol and is not necessary to salvation. But then you might meet another Protestant who says that it's not just symbolic and it absolutely is necessary. Jehovah's Witnesses don't tolerate these kinds of contradictions within their own organization. One Jehovah's Witness cannot say baptism is symbolic, and then you meet another one and they say, no, it's more than that. The one saying it is more than symbolic is going to get the boot from the authority structure. Jehovah's Witnesses are going to laugh at all of those types of careless contradictions found in Christianity. So before Protestants walk away from a conversation with a Jehovah's Witness and laugh at how illogical and backwards they sound, they should know that Jehovah's Witnesses are poking fun at the contradictions and illogical allowances that Protestants make room for. And I started to notice this about myself after trying to talk to Jehovah's Witnesses as a Protestant. I would laugh at how they would illogically allow for 180s in their beliefs, total contradictions in what they believed previously compared to what they believe currently. But at the same time, I was telling them to become a Christian in the vague sense of the word. Was I really telling them to just come and select from a variety of contradicting positions within Protestantism? How did that make sense? I ultimately began to see that when Jehovah's Witnesses I had known in the past would say something like, if someone doesn't like his own church in Christendom, he will just go and start a new one down the road. They were kind of right. That does happen. It can and does happen. And when Jehovah's Witnesses reply to a Protestant on the Bible, well, that's just your interpretation, they're right again. Basically, the Jehovah's Witness is saying to you, you don't have the authority to bind me to your interpretation of those scriptures. You don't have the authority to tell me what the interpretation of that verse is. And technically, the Protestant would have to say they agree. They don't have the authority to bind anyone's conscience to any particular interpretation. Basically, the Jehovah's Witnesses, while their beliefs are wrong, their conclusion that there does need to be some kind of unifying authority beyond the Bible itself is logical. I have to give credit where credit is due. They know that if everyone is interpreting, there's going to be a vast difference of resulting beliefs. And while Protestants may say, well, we have authority too, there's authority structures going on. Well, maybe, but I would like to point out that the authority is not actually authoritative if you feel free to start a new church or join a new denomination whenever you start to disagree. If you reserve the right to jump ship when you don't think you like where the church is heading, it's not really authoritative to you. Having an authority means that the authority has the right to give orders and enforce obedience. The Jehovah's Witnesses get that. The Catholics get that. But the Protestants seem to waver. And I understand that because when I was a Protestant, I liked the idea of being able to have more control over what theology made sense to me. And the idea of submitting to any authority, true authoritative authority, again, made me uneasy. However, it was at the very point that I started to study more, ask more questions, and explore some very uncomfortable things that finally I came to address the problem of authority, and then things became clearer to me. Catholic authority is not in place for the sake of controlling you as a person in order to get stuff from you. Catholic authority is about protecting the Christian tradition, which includes the scriptures themselves. It's about preserving timeless truths about Christ, ourselves, and the world. And in protecting and preserving truths, the church is able to protect and preserve souls as well, because what we believe and do matters. Tough questions I have found have been best answered and addressed from within the Catholic context. From birth control to the nature of Christ, you're bound to find incredible answers with incredible depth. No need for blindfolds. You can just keep exploring endlessly. This is a hierarchy, yes, but that's what makes it beautiful. What I once found as repulsive and freaky, I suddenly began to find as one of the most beautiful things about the church. Our culture teaches us to distrust or even hate authority, but we need it. A hierarchy is a sacred rule, and there is a hierarchy even among the angels. It makes sense that we need hierarchy on earth. We need it in our families, and so we need it in the church. The Catholic authority and hierarchy has been passed down since the time of Christ. This is the lineage of the church. Think about how the lineage of Christ was provided in the Bible. It's not just a list of names for the sake of knowing some family members. It's for proving who Jesus was and is. It's giving evidence. It's like part of the receipts for showing who he is. Likewise, the church has a record of authority passed down since the time of the apostles. These are undeniable receipts of the church. That's why the church fathers defended this hierarchy and succession. It's why Irenaeus of Lyons wrote that he was referring the heretics to the tradition which originated from the apostles and is preserved by means of succession of the presbyters in the church. He wrote that by the succession there is the most abundant proof that there is one and the same vivifying faith which has been preserved on the church from the apostles until now. It's why Polycarp wrote that the people of the church should submit to the presbyters and deacons as you would Christ. He mentions Valens, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but he was a presbyter who was acting ignorant of the office given to him. This is not a church where people can just decide for themselves if they're destined to lead a new church. This is an office given and bestowed. It's why Ignatius said that communion with the bishop was necessary, that one should do nothing without the bishop, but to follow him as you would Christ. He wrote that to rise up against the bishop is to attempt to destroy the church and sow confusion. Didn't his words from so many centuries ago prove true? Did our ancestors buck authority? And what is left? What do we have now but confusion in our societies? It wasn't supposed to be like this. Irenaeus describes how the church really is. This is what he says. As I have already observed, the church, having received this preaching and this faith, although scattered throughout the whole world, yet, as if occupying but one house, carefully preserves it. She also believes these points of doctrine, just as if she had but one soul and one and the same heart, and she proclaims them and teaches them and hands them down with perfect harmony, as if she possessed only one mouth. For although the languages of the world are dissimilar, yet the import of the tradition is one and the same. For the churches which have been planted in Germany do not believe or hand down anything different, nor do those in Spain, nor those in Gaul, etc., etc. He goes on like this for some time, concluding that the church is the Catholic Church, capital C. In conclusion, the Jehovah's Witnesses realize the need for authority. They just have the incorrect authority. Their authority popped up in the 1800s and has morphed until this day. But it's not that different from many Protestant churches who claim the same thing as the Jehovah's Witnesses, basically. That the initial church became corrupted, there was a great falling away, but God preserved a remnant that reestablished pure worship later, etc., etc. If you're a Protestant, try looking up when your denomination was founded. Ask yourself if you can explain why Jehovah's Witnesses should accept your authority over the authority they already have. Why should they accept your interpretation over the one they already have? Can you explain to Jehovah's Witnesses which church they should go to or which ones they shouldn't go to? And can you explain your standard for measuring that? These became impossible questions for me as a Protestant, and as a Catholic, I can now answer them succinctly. So Catholics, if you're watching, I suggest that you guys start talking to Jehovah's Witnesses. I see a lot of videos of Protestants talking to them, but I haven't seen a lot of videos of Catholics talking to them. Don't start with the Trinity. Don't start arguing them on those sorts of things. They're not going to accept your interpretation. But start with authority, because Jehovah's Witnesses can actually respect the idea of a necessary authority and a God-given authority. So then show them the receipts from the church that Christ built. God bless you guys.